Hello and good evening, everyone. On tonight's show, we will be having Honorable Nelson Chamisa. He'll be joining us shortly. But before we do that, I'd like to just update you on what Concerned Citizens Support Network of Zimbabwe have been doing on behalf of the citizens. As you're well aware, last week we did a forum on electoral reforms, and we talked about 10 particular points which were important in relation to what constitutes free and fair elections. Thank you very much for everyone who called in and who made a contribution. Just so you know, we have this document. I don't know if you can see it. Concerned Support Network of Zimbabwe have compiled it, and this document has been sent to a few organizations. It's been sent to our local government. It's been sent to the UN. It's been sent to SADC. It's been sent to the AU. It's also been sent to Rory Stewart and the UK Ministry. In this document, we have all the issues that were raised last week on the Zimbabwe situation, especially in relation to electoral reforms. Now, while we're waiting for Honorable Chamisa to join us, I'll just give you a little rundown of what's in the document. If you would like a copy of this document, please communicate with Concerned Citizens Support Network of Zimbabwe. Go to their inbox, send them your email address, and they will send you this document so you know what they are doing on behalf of yourselves. This document talks about electoral reforms, and it also talks about the function of ZEC, all the elements that we talked about which were not in place, that needed to be in place, things like voters needing to be educated on elections, what are the elections for, being informed on their constitutional right to vote, and certain things that need to be in place. So whilst we're waiting, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information on some of the things that are not aligned to the Constitution. So the part of the Constitution that the electoral reforms concerns is the new Constitution, and it's section 239. Just so you know what those specifics are, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has the following functions: to prepare for, conduct and supervise elections to the office of the President and to Parliament, elections to provincial and metropolitan councils and the governing bodies, for instance, local authorities, elections of members of a National Council of Chiefs. In case some people didn't know, local chiefs are actually, their election process is also run by ZEC, for those of you who didn't know. Referendums, and to ensure that those elections and referendums are conducted efficiently, freely, fairly, transparently, and in accordance with the law. The Constitution also stipulates that ZEC's function is to supervise elections of the President of the Senate and the Speaker, and to ensure that those elections are conducted efficiently and in accordance with the law. So their jobs include to supervise elections of the President of the Senate. They also have a responsibility to register voters. So this whole business of the V9 form not being available, that is something that falls within their remit, and citizens should not be sourcing that document of their own accord. Their other job is to compile voters' rolls and registers to ensure the proper custody and maintenance of voters' rolls and registers. So us not knowing who the company they're using to purchase a central system or where our information is being held, all of that information should actually be transparent, and we should know where it is and how it is being stored. To delimit constituencies, wards, and other electoral bodies, to design, print, and distribute ballot papers, approve the form of and procedure ballot boxes, and establish the operations of polling stations. ZEC is also responsible, according to the Constitution, as I've just mentioned, for the conduct and supervision of voter education, to accredit observers of elections and referendums, to give instructions to persons in the employment of the state or of a local authority for the purpose of ensuring efficient, free and fair elections. And the list goes on. So if you do want to speak on this, I said to those of you who've just joined us, Concerned Citizens Support Network of Zimbabwe have compiled a document as a follow-up to last week's live feed on electoral reforms, the issues that were not in place. They've quoted the Constitution, the new Constitution. So for those of you who are aware of the old Constitution, we have kept everything up to date. Other areas include, and I'm not going to go through everything because it's very long. If you want a copy, please feel free to inbox Concerned Citizens Support Network of Zimbabwe. It has other functions of the Commission. principles for conducting democratic elections, voter education. All the websites are there. ZEC's website, any and every bit of information you need to know about electoral reform is there. And as well as a lot of the issues that are coming up at the moment. We have been informed that there have been issues relating to shortage of VR9 forms in Townhouse, Budiriro, Mount Pleasant, Mavuku, Chinhoyi University, Zvarasekwa. Also, we've had issues with the unavailability of the commissioners of oath at Maybarain Girls High School, David Livingston, Glen Lawn Shopping Centre. I mean, the list goes on. And also, as we mentioned last week on the live feed, we've had a problem with the recording of serial numbers in lots of areas. We've had issues with political intimidation in villages. You've all heard about what's been happening in Bulawayo, so that also has been noted. Yeah, the list goes on. So if anybody wants to ask a question, let me have a look. We're still waiting for Honorable Chamisa to join us. I'm sure that he will be here, even though he does have time constraints. What's the position on the diaspora vote? We can't give you affirmative action as to what will happen with that, but as you may or may not be aware, a lady did start that petition, Abigail, I'm sorry, Abigail, I keep forgetting your name. And when concerned citizens looked at that particular petition, it did not have any safeguards. So if you go to the Concerned Citizen Support Network page, you will see the list of 12 points that we compiled with the help of yourself. So thank you very much for that. And we have spoken to the lady who compiled that original petition, and those safeguards have actually been included. So we're waiting to reach the 5,000 mark, and then we will proceed from there. Okay. There don't seem to be any questions at the moment. I'm waiting for Honorable Chamisa, and if he does not get in touch with us in the next few minutes, perhaps I can call him over the phone just in case he's having network problems. Okay, so we do have a few questions for ZEC, which of course we perhaps won't get any answers to, and we've listed those from last week's live feed in terms of, well, one of the new issues that's come up is since aliens are now able to vote, does that then mean that the period in which elections will take place will be increased? We don't know. We're also hoping that Honorable Chamisa will answer a few questions with regards to what's been going on in the press at the moment. There are a lot of people talking about MDC was not consulted, MDC was consulted. So perhaps we can hear it from as close to the horse's mouth as possible so we can understand what that procedure was. Were they approached by the Mnangagwa administration? Did they put conditions forward as we believe from the information we have? And were those conditions not met? And therefore, MDC has decided that they will not be joining the government in any kind of unity. Okay, I see we haven't got Advocate Chamisa just yet, so perhaps I could call him on the phone. He may be struggling to join us. I'm just going to call him on WhatsApp. It's probably the easiest way. Okay. So while we're waiting for that, for those of you who've just joined us, hello? Hello? Honorable Chamisa, would you like to conduct the interview via WhatsApp, or are you going to call into the program?
I don't know. What am I supposed to do? I've been waiting.
Oh, you were waiting for a phone call? Okay.
Yes, you guys told me that you were going to call me. You were going to advise me how it's going to be done.
Okay, don't worry. Don't worry. We've got you here live, and can somebody please indicate whether or not you can hear Honorable Chamisa or not? Can you hear him? Thumbs up, please. Okay, thank you. Well, are you happy to proceed with the interview?
No problem. I'm ready, more than ready.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted, just a little bit of background information. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in Zimbabwe politics, and what your particular hopes and aspirations are for yourself and for Zimbabwe.
Sorry, you are saying?
Can you give us a little bit of background information on yourself?
Well, I don't know what you mean by that. I'm Nelson Chamisa, aged 39, born on the 2nd of February I'm so excited. I'm turning 40 next year.
Yes.
Life begins at 40.
Indeed it does.
Yeah, so yeah, that's me. I come from Zimbabwe, in a district, a very small district called Gutu, of Masvingo province. Yes.
So you're Zimbabwe born and bred?
Born and bred, raised, and hopefully I'll also complete my journey on this life in this beautiful country.
Wonderful, thank you. Can you tell us what's going on at the moment with MDC Alliance? Is it still in existence?
Very much. In fact, as I'm speaking, just today we had a number of programs across the whole country. We are already meeting the lower structures at provincial level, at district level. We are now having combined meetings, PDP, combined meetings with the other political parties, Nelson Chamisa MDC. We have had one in Gokwe yesterday. Today we had meetings in Midlands South and also proceeded to Gwanda. We deployed our Vice Chairman, Senator Komich, to be dealing with the holding of meetings. Of course, other parties were also represented. So we have a rollout of programs. We have constituted various teams to deal with the operational elements of the alliance, particularly the logistics, policy, international relations, issues to do with organizing, issues to do with also just making sure that when we then launch the MDC Alliance, we have a rollout of our manifesto, our key nuggets and talking points in terms of policies and what we are promising Zimbabweans in a new Zimbabwe. We are very smart in terms of our alternative programs as individual political parties, but we need to have source documents into the ultimate document. So a lot of things are happening in terms of that. We hold meetings every week on Thursdays for the principals, and of course, subcommittees do meet almost every week. We have deliberately said we're not going to be having rallies yet because our focus has been on the biometric voter registration process. So we are pretty much focused on door-to-door, person-to-person, making sure that we do the number crunching for Harare, for Bulawayo, for the rural areas, reaching out to key stakeholders, making sure that we engage them, we talk to them, we get them to hear and understand the importance of voting. So that has been our preoccupation, nothing quite on the visible side, on the mobilization side, in the context of rallies, but just in the context of the PVR.
Well, that's good news because I think, especially on social media, people feel that MDC is not, they're not visible. So it's good to know that you're doing some work. And I know that yesterday when we spoke, you said you were in the community and you were conducting voter education. Is that correct?
Of course, yes. We are doing voter education. That is the key thing. The most important thing at the moment, my dear, is, and of course, dear comrades hearing and fellow citizens, is to make sure that we get every vote. For those who are in the diaspora, we are hoping that you would also communicate back home to say, please, let every vote count. Let every Zimbabwean be part of this history. Let every Zimbabwean be part of the turning point in 2018. We are going to make history as a country next year. Trust me, believe you me. I feel it, I know it. I go into the communities. People are so ecstatic, they are excited. They know that by defeating Mugabe, the person, we have completed phase 1 of the struggle. Phase 2 of the struggle is to defeat and pulverize Mugabe, the system. And that is to defeat Mr. Mnangagwa in an election.
So in relation to that, I think it's really commendable that you're in the community and you're trying to harness voters. But what about the fact that our voting system has not quite been corrected? Is there anything that MDC is doing or you are doing yourselves in relation to ensuring that we will have free and fair elections?
Indeed, it has been forever a permanent path of our struggle to have reforms. We've said for us to be able to win elections in 2018, we must pursue twin objectives. The first one is to pursue the issue of convergence and an alliance building of all the democratic forces. And this entails making sure that we reach out to war veterans, we reach out to the churches, we reach out to the social movements, Pastor E, get him on board, all the other independents, get them on board, political parties, getting to come together so that there's a convergence of ideas, a convergence of direction, but more importantly, convergence of the human resources. especially Joyce Mujuru. We must get her on board with the liberation credentials, because we need everyone. Everybody has to be part of this convergence. So that has been our objective number one. It's still under consideration. We are still reaching out, a bit of some challenges, but quite surmountable. Then the second one has been to deal with the issue of the reforms, electoral reform.
Yes.
We need to ensure that we get a credible voters roll. The BVR process is part of those reforms, because we understand that if you are going to have a BVR platform, it's difficult for dead voters to be on the voters roll and resurrect on the day of voting, like
yes.
has been the case. So that is a reform which is so fundamental. The second reform is to be with the chlorination of ZEC at a secretariat level, so that we demilitarize it. We also remove spooks and other dangerous individuals who have caused acrimony for the people of Zimbabwe, so that the electorate is respected, not being manipulated by this electorate. That is your bureaucrats and all those people who are in charge of ZEC. The commissioners themselves have to be genuinely independent. That is a struggle. We continue to engage. The third point has been to say we need to make sure that we have a forensic audit of both the BVR platform and the servers, and also the issue of the ballot material to be used on the day of voting. That is already underway. We've secured it. We are going to be pushing for it. More importantly, we need access to the media. That has been a problem, but we hope that Mr. Dagwe is to be serious. We want to test this sincerity, and if he's to prove to people that he's serious, he must invite opposition leaders to also have a one-on-one interview or have a panel of discussions on television, on ZBC. Rallies have to be covered, opposition activities have to be covered on TV, ZBC, radio, and television. That, again, is going to be our call. We are not going to get fundamental reforms, but we have to call for them. We may even need to demonstrate and demand them. And we are very clear. We are monitoring the space. We are watching space. Traditional leaders in the rural areas have to be liberated from abuse by the ruling party. Even our soldiers have to be liberated from partisan politics. They are there for all of us. They should not be part of a political party. Those are issues we are going to be pushing for. And of course, our guarantor or underwriter is SADC, the United Nations, the EU, the African Union. We have already sent messages and emissaries to say, please underwrite this process on the return to legitimacy. So, yes, these are the reforms. We are pushing for them.
Wonderful. On that subject of communication with the Mnangagwa administration, a lot of people are unsure as to whether or not you have been approached by the administration in relation to the current cabinet or not, and whether MDC has declined on the basis that certain agreements were not met. Can you give us, can we hear it from the horse's mouth, please? Can you tell us what's happened as far as that process goes?
Listen carefully to the voice of the horse, to use your language.
Yes, indeed.
We were ever conducted at a formal level, even at an informal level. I've been in discussions with our president. Mind you, I'm the vice president, meaning to say that whatever the president then engages in, I ultimately get to know about it, because we have to give advice when necessary and when need to be. Of course, the ultimate decision has to be made by the organs. But I must say to you that there was never a formal invitation to the MDC to be part of the inclusive government. For that reason, there was never a consideration by any of our organs, the National Standing Committee, the National Executive, or the National Council, which are the key decision-making bodies, to then consider whether or not to participate in an inclusive government. So all these things that are being said are actually coming as news to us. I checked with my president again and once more. He indicates to me that he was not conducted. I, for one, I've seen my name being thrown around, that I had been asked to be a minister. I thought that it was just speculative, and of course hallucinatory on the part of the people who were coming up with those lists. I was not informed or approached by any of the people from ZANU-PF, ED himself included, to be part of the inclusive government. We understood from the beginning that it was a ZANU-PF affair, and we respected that because we understand that they also have their pressures to deal with. So what is obviously coming from Mr. Mtswangwa is coming as a surprise. There was never a communication. If he did, I've challenged him already to say, if you were in touch or in communication with any of the MDC leaders, please indicate the name so that we can also help the nation and help ourselves
Indeed.
to investigate and understand what it is all about.
Thank you very much for clarifying that point. So MDC was not approached. So for all of those who are assuming that certain things happened, nothing happened. So in relation to the alliance, what kind of cabinet should we expect from yourselves? Will there be women? Will there be younger people? Because it looks like we haven't moved away from the status quo that we have just, well, we assumed we had exited from.
For us, a cabinet is supposed to be the mosaic manifestation of the totality of our being as a people, with our various demographies, our geography, our tribes, a variety of considerations have to be put in place. We must respect all the regions. We must respect all the demographic groups. The millennials and the young people do constitute the majority. But if you look at Mr. Mnangagwa's cabinet, either he has forgotten that they are young people, or he has forsaken the idea of young people being relevant stakeholders. Perhaps they look at young people as stakeholders, so they don't trust young people. And that is a problem for us, because what it does tell you is that they are already ignoring a critical component of nation building. We can't build a nation with the adult population only, particularly with the gerontocrats, those who are in their 70s, their 80s. We need young people, and for them to be there, we need, from an optical point of view, in terms of optics, just to have young faces so that people have their role models, people to look up to. So an MDC alliance cabinet is going to have young people in it, is going to have women in it. In fact, I'm actually surprised that Mr. Mnangagwa, being a lawyer himself, he has started on a bad note by violating the Constitution. He has ignored the Constitution in terms of the number of ministers that could be appointed who are not in Parliament. He has violated the Constitution in terms of the gender dimension, because the Constitution now does behoves and does insist on all those who are leaders to make sure that in the composition of governmental institutions and public institutions, there is gender, equality and gender equity. So those things have been sorted out. Those things must be sorted out. Those things have not been sorted out. And we are saying if we are to be able to correct the situation, we need to be respecting the Constitution. Mr. Mugabe was notorious for bringing wrong speeches. Mr. Mnangagwa has become notorious for bringing wrong cabinet lists. So he has started on a very bad note. You never have a wrong cabinet list in an MDC alliance framework. You have a lean and mean government. In fact, that is what we have been insisting to say, let the government ministries be trimmed so that there is austerity. There is also the relevance of making sure that we are confining ourselves to the key ministries, combining them so that we are able to move forward. So yes, the MDC cabinet is going to be based on a developmental state mindset. It's going to be focusing on making sure that we respect the various demographies in our population, but more importantly also our regions, unlike what you've seen being led by Mr. Mnangagwa. But more importantly also, you will not see us trying to bring our good soldiers to be part of civilian politics. Yes, if they've retired, there's no problem, but it will be minimized. We'll have them working in maybe parastatals and other important institutions, but to try and bring serving men and women into a cabinet is a bit problematic.
So in relation to young people, we are aware that in Matabeleland, that is one of the huge followings for the opposition. Are you doing much work in that area to ensure, because there's very low voter registration going on in that area? Are you working in Matabeleland at all?
Yes, we are working flat out, particularly in Matabeleland, to make sure that we boost up the vote. In fact, our effort is deployed to making sure that young people do vote. But I just want to give you some interesting statistics. MDC in 2008 got 214,000 votes in Harare. But then ZANU-PF got about 69,000 votes in Harare out of the registered then 780 voters. That is just in Harare. In 2013, we had a ramp up of the vote up to about 224. So a 10,000 addition to our voters. And ZANU-PF did 100,000 increase and got about 169,000. That's in 2013. But I want to tell you now, we have had a registration of voters, I think about 500,000 now, 538,000 within Harare. And again, you go to Bulawayo, our consistent vote has always been about 58,000, which has been very low. But with the registration that has gone on, there is a positive indication of our possibility of doubling the vote. But we still need to do more in terms of encouraging people to vote. A lot of people are skeptical, my dear, and dear citizens, that if you vote, it's not going to change much because the election is going to be rigged anyway. But the most important tool that ZANU-PF has used to rig elections is to cause people to be despondent and to think that the elections are rigged. So they rig your mindset before they rig the election. And most citizens have allowed their mindset to be rigged because they are skeptical, they are negative, and that is our biggest problem. Elections are rigged through the rigging of the mindset. That is what we must correct.
Well,
especially for the.
It's reassuring. It's reassuring to hear that you are actually working on ensuring that elections at home are free and fair. We have a question from Abigail who says, you haven't mentioned anything about a diaspora vote. Are you doing anything in relation to that?
Indeed, we are working flat out, my dear and fellow citizens. We actually have a matter that is in the Supreme Court, and we are following it keenly in terms of using the fresh window that has been provided by the new constitutional dispensation so that the diaspora vote is respected. Mind you, in terms of the SADC guidelines, the diaspora vote is a necessity, is a must, it's a sign. Oh, sorry, I'm now using Latin as a lawyer. It's so important to make sure that it is respected by all the national jurisdictions, not just Zimbabwe, but all the countries in SADC. So if we are not going to respect the diaspora vote, that would be in violation of the SADC guidelines, and we are members to that protocol. So we need to make sure that we respect our diasporans so that they vote. Diasporans have contributed significantly in terms of the revenue. I think even in terms of GDP, I don't have the statistics and figures offhand, but that contribution cannot just come without also a corresponding privilege and right to be able to vote and decide the leadership of a country.
Indeed.
So it's going to be one of the key reforms. Apart from the reforms that I mentioned, it's also in addition in terms of making sure that our diasporans do vote because they are citizens. It's only that by circumstances of the economy, politics, and other reasons, they are out of our country. But that does not make them less Zimbabwean. They are not Zimbabwean. They are not non-Zimbabwean. So
okay, we'd like to. Yes, we know that you don't have much time. We'd like to open up some questions to the general public. And someone has said, why don't you ask Tsvangirai to step down and and pass the baton on to yourselves? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've heard about this. You know what? I must be frank with you, and thank you for that question. We must understand that we have a context. We are an African party in an African setting. We must respect protocol. We must respect constitutions, and we must understand that certain things that are done have to be done within the confines of the constitution. True and granted, our president has not been feeling well. We hope and we are praying that he will also get better. But in terms of making sure that we create a momentum on the ground, we're already putting in place mechanisms to make sure that if there are any challenges, which we do not anticipate, but if there are any challenges, there is an alternative plan to make sure that the struggle for change is not going to be undermined, hijacked, or hamstrung because we have certain circumstances. So we are very conscious of our circumstances. But at times, we do not need to be uncouth and cruel because sickness is not something that one invites. It visits us. It can visit you, it can visit myself or any other person.
So so in essence, what you're saying is that MDC is well aware of President Tsvangirai's health conditions, and that there are measures in place, and you are aware of that, and it is part of the process that you're going through at the moment, and that you do have measures in place to make sure that there is a succession plan.
Precisely. What I was just saying is that we cannot then do it in a haphazard manner. We are a well-structured party, an 8-year-old party, and we are, in fact, we've attained the legal age of majority as a party. We are an adult. We are about to marry or to be married. So that's why, even the election in 2018 is so symbolic and significant for the party, because we have also come of age. We have had our mistakes, our misses, our negligence, and we've learned from our past mistakes. And I can assure you that we will not repeat the mistakes of yesteryear, the 2013 mistake, or the mistake of giving ZANU-PF an election on a silver platter. We have learned a lot, and it's not as if we have learned nothing and forgotten nothing. We have learned a lot, and we are going to even deal with the issue. President Tsvangirai is recuperating, and we hope that he will be strong and fit. But we strengthen more the issue of institutions as opposed to personalities.
We have a slightly disgruntled citizen here who said, "It's all talk and no tangible action. You have been letting us down for a while. You don't give us any hope whatsoever." What would your response be to that?
It's so emotional, and it's good to be emotional, but you must also say, where have we failed in terms of tangible results? Mind you, this is the party you are talking about that brought about democracy in Zimbabwe by continuing to maintain, guarding of zones of autonomy, being an alternative narrative. We have done that even in the inclusive government. You know that we are the ones who taught ZANU-PF alternative politics. They were never used to having mayors, councillors, MPs from the opposition. They would beat up people, and beat the hell out of people just to make sure that there is no opposition. We have stood and we have withered the storm. So that must be understood. We have been a consistent opposition, a consistent alternative until we become a government. So that must be understood. Number two, you must also understand that there are things that we have done. The democratic constitution we have in Zimbabwe, which is not entirely perfect, but significantly and substantially perfect, is a product of our struggles. We have that constitution that gives people rights. We have that constitution that we feel gives Zimbabweans a fighting chance. Yes, it's still under perfection, and we must continue to perfect it, but it is a starting point, and it is because of our efforts together with the civic society and other citizens. So it's not correct to say that the MDC has been a bunch of disappointment. We have actually had serious, significant gains, which gains are supposed to be honored, which gains are supposed to be respected. We have been a consistent kid on the block.
Can we go back a little bit to ZEC? As you know, ZEC is giving us 4 months to register 7 million citizens, whereas in places like Botswana and
South... Before you go to ZEC, is your disgruntled citizen or fellow citizen convinced or answered? Because we want to make sure that we resolve on that one.
Okay, so that's for you, Jim Elijah Muchesa. Can you please respond to Honorable Chamisa? He says, his question is, are you convinced by his response? So we'll wait to hear from you. Whilst we're waiting, can you tell us, do you feel that the time ZEC has given us is sufficient? 4 months to register 7 million voters, whereas some countries take a year to register 2 million?
Certainly not. In fact, we are going to raise this thing at 2 platforms and 2 levels. First, we are going to raise this with ZEC through our layers and committees, being represented by the Secretary for Elections, Mr. Maurice Zizwai. He's going to take the charge in presenting and making representations in terms of our view. We are also going to use the parliamentary platform. I'm going to lead the charge in Parliament to make sure that we ask for an extension of the period. It's not possible, it's not fathomable that you would register millions of people just within 2 months, just within 4 months. It's too short a period. There hasn't been sufficient information to the citizen, but also in terms of travel arrangements for people who are working in the various parts of the country, we have to make certain arrangements. It is not an easy task. So we want an extension of the period so that all the people are allowed to vote. More fundamentally, we've had this intervention by the military. It actually chewed into our time. So almost 2 weeks, there was no significant activity, particularly in the first 3. So that has to be revisited, and we must compensate for that time. But we also had the aliens who were not registered to vote because there was no constitutional pronouncements through the courts. Now that there is a pronouncement which was made this week or this past week, we now need to make sure that we compensate for that by extending the period. So it's not enough, and we are going to ask for ZEC to extend the period. If they don't, it's part of our reform narrative that we are going to push for, including having demonstrations for our rights.
And what about the agreement that Zimbabwe made with SADC with regards to electoral reforms? Are you engaging ZEC or SADC in relation to that directly?
In fact, I told you that in terms of SADC being a guarantor and an underwriter to this process, we are in constant touch. In fact, we've deployed teams to SADC, to the AU, to appraise them of the demands that we have, the 5 key demands for a free and fair election. I've already given you some of them, and we've already laid this before SADC. There is positive feedback, and we hope that they will continue to support us. And you have heard their pronouncement. All of them are saying the 2018 election is supposed to be free and fair. Even international players like the EU, the AU, and the United Nations, the US, and the UK, they are all emphasizing the need and the desirability of this election to be a free, credible, and fair election. So we are happy with the efforts there. But like I told you, this is a struggle. It is never enough until we have achieved the objective.
Yes. I have a comment here from someone who's definitely a fan. Gomorashe Nongera said, my VP is excellent. He can answer any question from whatever angle. And he says, big up.
Oh, thank you. At least I think it does compensate for a comment from, is it Nigel?
I'm afraid I'm not able to screen back. I can only see his comment when he comes. Someone here who obviously has come very late into the program, Lord Mokaranda says, why is it they are refusing to enter the transitional government? I think people perhaps are not quite understanding that you were not invited into a transitional government.
Yes, my simple and straight answer to my brother, Lord Mo, is that here is our trajectory as MDC. We have said there has to be a 4-step trajectory or roadmap to a return to credible and free and fair elections, or a return to democracy, or a return to civilian rule. The stages are these. Number 1, let us have a transitional mechanism. We have not even said the nature, character, or form of this transitional mechanism has to be like this. We are not being prescriptive. We are being descriptive in terms of the transitional mechanism we must have. Now, as to whether the MDC should be part of it or not, this was supposed to be part of the dialogue, out of respect. In fact, this is where I have problems with Mr. Mnangagwa. When he came in as a new broom, the first thing he was supposed to do was to invite the leader of the official opposition in Zimbabwe, because to all intents and purposes, Mr. Tsvangirai is the alternative head of state, is the shadow head of state, if we are to go to along the Westminster kind of government. So he has to be given his respect, just to say, how do you feel and what do you think about the future of the country? Then the dialogue has to be kick-started in the context of our view on the transitional mechanism. Stage number 2 would then to be saying, what is it that we would want to see in terms of reforms during this transitional period, maybe 8 months, or even if we were to discuss the duration or gestation period of that transitional period, that would be another issue. But what are the reforms? Electoral reforms, which I've already indicated, governance reforms, which are very important in terms of access to various areas, elimination of violence, making sure that there is no state-part conflation, what is called partocracy. There is a distinction between the party and the state, making sure that our police are indeed a police service, not a police force, making sure that our soldiers are indeed military in the barracks and not in the villages, making sure that our intelligence system is focusing more on the protection of the nation, economic intelligence, as opposed to, spying on political players or gladiators. Those are the governance reforms we would want to see. The political reforms we would want to see, making sure that there is access to the media, freedom of the media, multiplicity of voices, making sure that we celebrate our diversity. We hold joint rallies, ZANU-PF there, MDC there, just like we do with Dynamos and Cape United or Manchester United and us now. We should demystify politics and demonize politics, so that we sermonize it. It becomes a solemnized kind of enterprise. That again is part of the reforms. So that has not happened. So the third issue, and just allow me, the third issue is to then make sure that whatever reforms we agree on, there must be guarantors, because we know that it takes two to tango, but it's also possible for one of the parties to be very delinquent and mischievous. So if they were to be mischievous, there has to be a fallback position in terms of the guarantor, who is the referee or some kind of a superintendent who is able to say, oh, hang on, you have breached on this aspect or on that aspect, and this is the remedy or the relief. So that is the third aspect, and AU comes in, the SADC comes in, or some other eminent persons on the African continent or internationally. Last but not least, which is important, is the issue of international supervision and observation, and making sure that we have a conducive environment for a free and fair election, which election is held either according to the constitution or according to the time frame agreed upon by all the political actors.
That was going to be my question. What happens when MDC wins this time and ZANU-PF refuses to go, like they've done in the past? So I guess you're saying you are putting measures in place to ensure that.
No. This time, like I told you, we take no prisoners. We are leaving no stone unturned. If ZANU-PF refuses to go after we've beaten them in an election, we will push them out. We are not in any. We no longer have time to joke around. Some of us are already, growing some white beard and white hair. We started this thing as toddlers, so we can't allow this. Otherwise, we are aging fast.
Yes, indeed. Wow, thank you very much. I know you said you didn't have very much time, so let's just see if anyone else has any questions. I'm afraid Honorable Chamisa did not have much time today, and he's given us more than he had promised, so thank you very much. But let's see if we have any more questions from the audience. What do you offer the people of Zimbabwe that is different from ZANU-PF?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question. As MDC-T, of course, we must bear in mind the fact that we have an MDC alliance framework, policy framework. But as MDC-T, we already have two fundamental documents that we are going to be using. The first one is the SMART document, which is SMART, an acronym for Sustainable, Measurable Agenda for Real Transformation. It has 5 fundamental pillars. The first pillar has to do with governance. What we are going to do in terms of the size of government, the size of parliament. We must do away with this bicameral parliament. We must do away with this omnibus parliament and have a minibus parliament so that we cut on the erosion of the fiscus. We must also deal with devolution. Devolution is the next revolution in Zimbabwe. We must make sure that we devolve authority, we devolve powers, but we also devolve development, so that we have localized development, local needs for local people, and local solutions for local people. That is also going to be very key, just on the issue of governance. The issue of the police, reforming the police, making sure that we do not have roadblocks. The first thing you will see is the ending of all roadblocks, and we will replace human personnel with digital cameras on our roads as just a governance issue, as a governance measure. So that is fundamental. Inclusion, you are going to see more of the opposition being given the opportunity to participate in governance. Instead of being exclusionary, we're going to be inclusionary. So that's on the governance. I could go on and on.
Oh, yes, that's why. We have a question here. How are you going to reduce cabinet when you have 3 vice presidents?
Yes, again, that's over and over again. You must understand that a political party is not a government. A political party is a political party governed, is a voluntary organization governed by its own statute and its own association document. What is clear is that these people who are in a political party are not paid, they are not on a salary. I'm not paid to be vice president. If anything, I pay to be vice president in terms of time, in terms of commitment, in terms of what I'm doing for my nation. But I don't want to be paid back for it because it's in a political party setup. And we have a constitution that we follow democratically. In fact, if you look at all social democratic parties, they even have 3, 4, 5 vice presidents, depending on the regions, depending on other considerations. age being a factor, gender being also another dimension to be considered. So it's not something that is anathema. It's not something that is out of this world. It's normal. You can check in Norway, you can check in Sweden in terms of the structure of their political parties. But even if you look at our tradition within the ZCTU, you have almost 4 or 5 secretary generals or deputy secretary general who deal with various issues depending on how the constitution is structured. Now, coming to government, a lean government is only so because we are now talking about the taxpayer and these people are paid. So that's the difference. And this is why we said as MDC Alliance, when we get into government, and I'm not saying if, because we are going to be in government very soon, we are going to make a distinction between the state and the party. There is a separation. You can have 1 million vice presidents, but in government, we need you to have 1 vice president. It's very possible. It's like our provinces. We have 12 provinces in the MDC. It does not mean that we will have provinces in government. We have a youth assembly and a women's assembly. In ZANU-PF, they call it a women's league. But in government, you will not have a women's league. Party structures are different from government structures. And let this sink quite clearly in the people's minds.
Thank you. Maitsoka wants to know when you intend to start campaigning, considering the limited time that we have left.
Oh, thank you very much to Maitsoka. We have already begun campaigning. The only thing is that we've changed our strategies. Our strategy has always been to be loud and to be noisy and to be visible. But this time now, we have said, look, we are going to go subterranean. We are going to be nocturnal and Nicodemus. We realize that there's a bigger catch at night, and we admire witches on that aspect. So we are bewitching ZANU-PF, and we do not need to do it during broad daylight. So I will not disclose what we are doing, but we are doing a lot. We are going to start the visible programs much later. At the moment, we have house to house, door to door, person to person, quiet and subtle programs, reaching out to key stakeholders, the chiefs, reaching out to opinion leaders in various communities and even the church. And it's really working quite well. We are so happy with the results. I know that people want us to be in a vuvuzela mode, but you don't go, on the vuvuzela mode without making sure that you are purely structured, organically organized. Then you can go on to the mobilization.
Well, in relation to that structure and organization, a question here is, how will you deal with corruption, and will your leaders declare their assets?
In fact, we have taken the lead. In Parliament just a month ago, I tabled a motion insisting that members of Parliament declare their assets as a gesture of goodwill, because that is what the Constitution so demands, the national Constitution. But even in the MDC, we have said, we've had our councils that have been delinquent, bad apples in a basket. We have thrown those bad apples to make sure that the basket is preserved. The MDC has a zero tolerance to corruption. You are aware that we have not tolerated corruption, and in fact, our ministers have not been corrupt. Even in the inclusive government, we efforted to be as transparent as possible. We had hands-on, but not hands-in. We were very corruption-free, and we were insisting on hard work, smart work for the people of Zimbabwe. And that is what we assure you. We are genuine. Yes, we make mistakes because we are human. But one thing is that we are genuine in our discharge of duties.
Okay, an earlier question was in relation to the fact that your party has split at times. So somebody wanted to know what are you doing, or how are you going to ensure unity? You've said that you're an honest party, but how will you ensure unity remains within the party, and that we don't end up with the same thing that's happened with ZANU-PF, where we have factionalism and division of the party?
Well, unity is very important, but you must also understand that big organizations, just like families, they always have problems of people who fracture away, or people who choose to splinter away. It's not just in politics, even in trade unions, even in churches. You have people who have an appetite for leadership, people who like to pursue the Luciferian tendencies of rebellion. They just want to be leaders unto themselves. those will always come. But at times, it's very important for big organizations to peel off and to exfoliate so that the outer skin that is become unnecessary peels off or peels away. It gives new breath to a political party. So it's not something bad when individuals choose to go their own way. But we'll try, and we are trying in the context of convergence to say, even our comrades who had gone away, please come back. To add is to strengthen, to subtract is to weaken. We need every shoulder to the block. But you cannot rule out, some other delinquent, conduct or some runaway and galloping ambition in our midst. It's natural. Human beings always want to be devious at times.
So Taurai Rugonye has two questions. First of all, he's asking about your relationship with Gushungo Dairies, I believe, and also he's saying that you are talking about what you talk about now. Have your electoral ideas been stolen and implemented by ZANU-PF? I think that's the question. There's been talk about ZANU-PF stealing. So
well,
two questions.
Let me just answer first the issue that I keep getting. I've just taken it as a joke because I thought that any serious person would check to see if there is indeed that kind of a Gushungo Dairy company that is operating. That is a lie that has been replayed by political detractors within and outside the party because they have nothing to nail me on or to label and condemn me upon. So they would want to then create all sorts of things. Mr. Mugabe is there. I think he now has more time to actually answer to those questions. He's the one who's got a business with his wife. You can go and say, have you ever had a business, with Mr. Chamisa? I'm sure it will be a hilarious moment for him. He has been going through a very difficult time. So I think, please, he needs some comic, relief.
Can we answer his second question, which is to do? I hope I've got this right. About
I haven't finished answering the first one.
Sorry.
So as for me, as Nelson Chamisa, I'm not into business. I'm not a businessman. I'm an advocate with the Superior Courts of Zimbabwe. Apart from that, I'm also a politician. And being a politician, I've never been in business, let alone the business of transport. I don't own any truck. If anything, there's a truck that I used to own, but I since, laid it off. So I want this to be settled and settled well. I'm not a person who is dishonest. If I had business, I would say, yes, I have a business with so and so, but I'm not into business. This is a lie that has been reproduced by some detractors because they think that when they label me and condemn me by associating with me with ZANU-PF or Mr. Mugabe because it's so unpopular, is their way of fighting me. But I didn't want to give, sanctity to that kind of foolish ideas. But look, because your client, or your citizen, would want to your listener would want to know what Mr. Chamisa's position is. I've told you my position. You can do an investigation and be sure by yourself, go to the company's registry or anywhere. If you have evidence to the contrary, I've got my name on the line for it.
Thank you. His second question, I think it also ties into another rumor. He's saying all this that you're talking about will now be stolen as an idea and implemented before you come in. And also there's been talk about ZANU-PF having stolen MDC ideas. And I know, again, it's a rumor, but can you give us any information on that?
Well, look, we've heard our voice through Mr. Mnangagwa. The MDC voice has been the dominant voice in Mr. Mnangagwa's pronouncements. And we are happy for it. If it is good for the people, at the end of the day, it's not about who has to bear the glory. It's not about who has to carry the trophy. If Team Zimbabwe wins, it's for all of us to celebrate. So if Mr. Mnangagwa is able to implement good ideas, we can't say that MDC is the alpha and omega, the beginning and the end of all good ideas. Yes, we are reservoirs, we are repositories of good ideas. They have been, taken by our colleagues in ZANU-PF. I can't say that they have stolen because we don't have intellectual property rights to good ideas. In as much as we know that good ideas are resident with us and are mostly belong to us, it does not necessarily mean that ZANU-PF cannot also come up with good ideas. The most important thing is that we have a common denominator point. which is the country called Zimbabwe. So if Mr. Mnangagwa is able to deliver and deliver well, we must celebrate the good ideas so that the nation moves forward. If we are also able to then bring those ideas forward, we must be celebrated. That's how we should move.
Somebody here, Lloyd Chanakira, says, thank you, Chamisa, you're a leader. You're answering perfectly. You are a star. Somebody, obviously a fan there. One other question, Tapiwa Chinembiri says, what's your take on some reports that certain MDC councillors were corrupt during the GNU?
Not just during the GNU, even today. And we will expect them to be corrupt even tomorrow. The issue is, what do we do with such people? Because the biggest problem for our politics is that we have politicians who are career politicians. We have politicians who benefit from positions instead of serving in those positions. Service and sacrifice as a culture, as an attribute, as a department is something that is very elusive and evasive for most people in public office. So we need a restoration of a public service culture, a citizen service culture, amongst our leaders. For that to happen, it starts from the head. It starts with the leader. And I hope that Mr. Mnangagwa will show us that he has turned the leaf, he has hit his Damascus moment, he's a new man. Or else, if he continues the Gushungo, fiasco, it will be very sad, and we'll drop him well in this, upcoming election, so that we send him home and homes very soon. Our councillors have not been saints. But most of them have tried. We have had, Masvingo, for example, the municipality has done very well. Mutare, to some extent, very well. Bulawayo, I think, fantastic. Harare, very well. But there have been interventions also by central government. The Minister of Local Government, Mr. Kasukwere, I'm not so sure who's going to be there. It's a structural legislative impediment, wherein you have the minister having too much powers, dinosaur powers, to impose, his or their will on the councillors, interfering with smooth management of local authorities, and even in the end, corrupting those councillors, because corruption becomes commonplace when it is being fertilized from the top. And these are issues we've been grappling with. I told you we're to fire Chitungwiza municipality, the whole of it, on account of corruption. We fired the councillors in Harare, in Bulawayo, investigated them, and even punished them. Because corruption is always going to be a cancer that has to be rooted out. And the best way to do it is to be radical and to be, precise in terms of dealing with culprits.
Okay, 2 more questions. I'm aware that we've gone 20 minutes over the allotted time. My apologies. This seems like an important question. What are you to do with the unproductive farms and people with more than one farm?
Yes, in fact, this is what we have been insisting on. We are going to insist on a land commission. Which land commission is inclusive, which land commission is the non-partisan, which land commission is going to be a government-sponsored commission to deal with the rationalization of the land so that there's proper land audit. Once there's a proper land audit, we move away from just talking about land reform to agrarian reform. We need to deal with the issue of the pricing of our agricultural product. We need to look at the issue of an agricultural plan, an agricultural model. We need to look at issues of the market for agricultural produce. We need to increase our yield per hectare. We need to make sure that we fundamentally reduce, the abuse of land as an entitlement, as opposed to being a product upon which we have to then utilize it for the benefit of our economy. So we are going to go into an agrarian reform, moving from subsistence agriculture to commercial agriculture, treating agriculture as a business. But in terms of land, those who have got multiple farms, they have to surrender them. And we must also make sure that we move on to a land tenure system that gives value to our land, so that those who want to borrow, are able to borrow against the land that they own. So we need to make sure that we capitalize our land, and our land becomes a capital, entitlement, which is good for investment, but also good for unlocking the full value of our debt capital.
Wonderful. Okay, my final question to you. Will MDCT and MDC Alliance hold any more protests to put pressure on things like electoral reforms? Do we have anything in the pipeline?
I told you that we're already organizing. We want to test the new dispensation and see if Mr. Mnangagwa is indeed a new man. if he has been born again. It is our wish that Mr. Mnangagwa has been born again, but for us to test him, we must give him a beer mark. Then we see if he's not going to be tempted to imbibe, So we are going to test.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to ask all the questions. Do you have a final word for the citizens of Zimbabwe from yourself?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much. Sorry we've gone over. Thank you. So there you've heard it from the horse's mouth, if you like. I'm sorry that I was not able to ask all the questions that you had. Honorable Chamisa had 40 minutes and we've gone through to an hour. So I hope that you found today's live broadcast useful and that some of your questions have been answered. If there are any other pressing questions or information that you want to share, please by all means communicate with Concerned Citizen Support Network of Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for your time and we'll see you next week, same time, 7 p.m. Zimbabwe time for our next program. Thank you very much and Viva Zimbabwe.